trenches. Let's make a righteous ruckus.
Hey, welcome back to the Righteous Ruckus podcast. I'm your host, Riley Lowe, and man, I'm especially grateful today. Just got back, watched our oldest daughter. She had like a little dance recital thing going on in the park, up on stage. It was really cool watching her dance. And so anyway, I want to jump in here, and I want to talk about kind of. I used to do this. Kind of, it's easy. I mean, a long time ago I did, but it's easy, especially as a Christian, really. Especially if you're a young Christian or a new Christian, it's easy to fall into the temptation to look down at unbelievers or look down at people that don't worship or believe the way that you believe, right? Now, granted, there are people that are just flat out heretics preaching blasphemy from pulpits today in America. I know, and probably other places around the world too. And it's kind of crazy to even say that because it wasn't always like this. But we're at a point, man. I just saw the other day in this clip. I think it was yesterday. A clip of this. Preacher, that's in air quotes. If you're listening, I'm in air quotes. This preacher, a pastor, saying that they were a pastor at a Methodist church in Orlando, Florida, and they had all rainbow stuff on. They had makeup on. It was a dude, and then he goes on right after that. Right, if he says, "Hey, I'm the pastor at this church, Methodist church in Orlando, Florida," then he proceeds right into, and I'm trying to decide on a drag name, on my stage name for my drag shows, and I haven't quite decided on any. And he was just saying it all in jest. I'm like, really, dude? So that is out there. There is that is just flat out just awful, right? Just basically unrepentant sin coming from the pulpit. But in any event, then that's just filtering through biblical worldview, filtering everything through the Bible. That stuff's got to be called out. In any event, I want to talk about, I'm going to jump in here and read a couple Bible verses like I usually do. And then I'm going to tell you some times that I've experienced this in my life. Okay. And the first one I want to do is we're just going to do two little sections here. First one is 2 Corinthians verse 10. And this is, or chapter 10. And this is verse 12. We'll go through 18. This is Paul to the Corinthians, right? It says, "For we dare not class ourselves or compare ourselves with those who commend themselves, but they, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves, are not wise. We, however, will not boast beyond measure, but within the limits of the sphere which God appointed us, a sphere which especially includes you, for we are not overextending ourselves as though our authority did not extend to you, for it was to you that we came with the gospel of Christ, not boasting of things beyond measure, that is, in other men's labors, but having hope that your faith is increased, we shall be greatly enlarged by you in our sphere, to preach the gospel in regions beyond you, and not boast in another man's sphere of accomplishment. But he who glories, let him glory in the Lord. For not he who commends himself is approved, but whom the Lord commends." In other words, we can't save ourselves, right? And also, don't compare yourself to the Christian sitting beside you in the pew. Compare yourself with Jesus. That's the goal, right? Okay. So let's see here. The next one I want to talk about is in John chapter 3, verses 25, and we're going to go through 35. And this is, it's self-explanatory here. So starting in verse 25, "Then there arose a dispute between some of John's disciples," that's John the Baptist's disciples, "and the Jews about purification. And they came to John and said to him, quote, 'Rabbi, he who was with you beyond the Jordan, to whom you have testified, behold, he is baptizing and all are coming to him.'" Everybody's coming to Jesus, John. We're going to lose our ministry because everybody's going to Jesus. John answered and said, quote, "A man can receive nothing unless it has been given to him from heaven. You yourselves bear me witness that I said, I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him. He who has the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly because of the bridegroom's voice. Therefore, this joy of mine is fulfilled." He's done all he needed to do, right? He continues here. "He must increase, but I must decrease." Jesus must increase, but I must decrease, right? "He who comes from above is above all. He who is of the earth is earthly and speaks of the earth. He who comes from heaven is above all. And that he had seen and heard, that he testifies, and no one receives his testimony. He who has received his testimony has certified that God is true. For he whom God has sent speaks the words of God. For God does not give the Spirit by measure. The Father loves the Son and has given all things into his hand. He who believes in the Son has everlasting life, and he who does not believe in the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God abides on him." In other words, focus on Jesus. John's saying there, telling his disciples, it was never about me, man. This was about Jesus. It was all about Jesus. All he's telling his buddies is, look, all my job to do was to point people to Jesus. That was my job. I'm not comparing myself to anybody else. The goal is to get people to Jesus. That's the only goal there is. And I guess an analogy, it's almost an inverse analogy, if that's even a thing. But years ago, a lot of years ago, I heard this, or I read this. It was on like a weightlifting, working out website, right? And there was comments in there. They're talking about kind of, I wish I could be like this and that, like Ronnie Coleman or Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever, some of these awesome bodybuilders. It's kind of almost wanting an instant gratification. And this person made a good point in this article. They said, if you walk in, almost no matter what shape you're in, right? You walk in to a busy gym. I'm talking like a big gym, right? With people working out all over the place. You walk in the door, it's easy for you to sit there and scan the room and go, that is what I want to look like. I come here, I want to be in shape. I want to look like that dude over there. That dude is ripped. That is what I wish I could look like. But here I am, a fat slob that looks like me, right? That's what you're saying. And the reality is you need to realize that it's likely that there's somebody in that gym. Like, we're picturing a busy gym here. There's somebody in that gym that looks at you. You just walked in the door. They're not looking at the superstar, super fit bodybuilder in training over there. They see you walk in the door and they're like, if I could just get as fit as that guy, I'd be happy. If I could just get as fit as that guy, I'd be happy. All right? So what I'm saying is, don't sit there and, the goal is not any of those people, right? The goal is just you to be as close to your target as possible. And in this case, what Paul is talking about and what John the Baptist is talking about is basically, who cares what somebody thinks of you? Who cares if you're trying to one-up somebody? We've all been there, right? We've all been in that conversation where if you say, man, I killed this 4-point buck the other day, somebody's going to say, well, that ain't nothing. Check this out. I killed a 10-point. If you say I killed a 10-point, somebody's going to say, look, man, I killed a 12-point the other day. Or look at this. This is a non-typical rack. Or I killed, or whatever the case may be, right? If you said, man, I like to race cars and I've got a 6-second car, they're going to say, man, back in the day, I built the 5-second car. That 6-second car ain't nothing. Right? They're always going to one-up you. There's those people out there, they're trying to one-up you because they're trying to impress you by outdoing you. Who cares? Nobody cares about that. The biggest buck I've killed is a 4-point buck. Like I've told people before, I like hunting. I'm just not that good at it. I'm good at turkey hunting. I think I'm pretty good at turkey hunting. But like deer hunting, I like doing it. but I haven't done it in a lot of years, but I like doing it, but I'm not very good at it. But my goal is not to impress you, right? And that's something that as I mature as a Christian that I strive to do, and I'm sure you struggle with this as well. It's super easy to get caught up in the one-upping and keeping up with the Joneses and everything else in this world where you want to have, man, like, I can't tell. This was before, I wasn't even planning on talking about this, but this was before BC, right? Before Christ. This was Riley before Christ. I bought this Pontiac Aztec. You remember the Pontiac Aztec? They're still held as one of the ugliest cars ever made. I bought this yellow Pontiac Aztec. I was young, stupid, making good money, and blowing it as fast as it was going in my bank account. And I bought this Pontiac Aztec, and it was yellow. Anyway, I dropped a bunch of money. I mean, I put custom wheels and custom window tint, custom seats, custom all sorts of stuff in there, right? Invested a ridiculous amount of money in a Pontiac Aztec. And it got me in a magazine, right? And it made people go, hey, well, that's a cool car. I've never liked a Pontiac Aztec, but I like that one. And I look back, and I still got the magazine framed in a room. You know, it's cool. I mean, it's cool. It's a cool accomplishment. It's unique accomplishment. But I also remember back thinking how cool it was to have other people commenting about my car and have people be in a magazine. Oh, this guy was in a mag. You had your car in a mag. Oh, it's so cool. That's pointless, man. At the end of the day, it's dumb. At the end of the day, it's a Pontiac Aztec. That's the thing. At the end of the day, it's a Pontiac Aztec, right? I've got more stories from the Pontiac Aztec. Trust me, I do. But at the end of the day, it's a Pontiac Aztec. Just like, where does it say? My works are as filthy rags. They're no good. They're no good, right? If I try to work my way into heaven, it ain't going to happen. If I try to impress people around me by my holiness and I'm holier than thou, right? My holier than thou attitude and looking down my nose at the other. What? Oh, you're not as far along your Christian walk. You're not as sanctified as I am. Oh, look at me. Look at me. You need to be like me. No. Never think like that, man. Never think like that. The goal is always Jesus. Who cares what you think about me, right? It's easy. I've made this comparison before. I could sit here and say, Joe Rogan's the most popular podcast in podcasting. He's the top of the heap when it comes to the podcast world. And here I am. I get maybe 10 people listen to my weekly podcast. Maybe, if I'm lucky, if 10's a good number, right? Yeah, maybe there's some stuff I could tweak. Maybe there's some things I could learn. I'm still going about the process. But guess what? That's 10 people that have a chance to be influenced to get to heaven. That's the goal, is to get the people to heaven. I could care less on how big of the crowd is that's focusing in on me, because I don't want them to focus on me anyway. If you're listening, if you're watching this podcast right now, the last thing you should be doing is saying, man, I want to be like Riley. You need to be saying, man, Riley's pointing people to Jesus. Riley's pointing me to Jesus. That's what I want to do. I want to focus on Jesus, and I want to point people to Jesus. That's what you need to be doing. And so that's the whole goal. That's the end game. And that's what Paul's talking about, and that's what John's talking about there. They're saying, and Paul's telling people, don't compare yourself. Don't look around and see where you are compared to the people around you. Don't sit there in your church this Sunday and look to your left and to your right and say, well, where am I at in the pecking order here? What you need to be doing is saying, where am I compared to Jesus? I guarantee you're below him. I guarantee you're below him, because he's at a level that we will never get to, but we will always strive to be at until we step into eternity and receive glorified bodies and get to fellowship with him, personally with him, right? That's the goal. And so, man, So I'm going to try to get into this. But so years ago, man, the most glaring example that comes to mind, and it snaps right into mind. Years ago, there was a guy I was working in the refinery, right? And there was a guy he was pretty newly hired. And as my role, I was an operator then, you would issue permits to pipe fitters and welders and laborers and scaffold builders and stuff to come in and do maintenance work, right? You were running the place. These people were coming in doing maintenance work. And you had to work on a daily basis with these people. The best thing to do is maintain a good rapport with the people that you need to fix your stuff for you, right? But it's easy when you're in that role of giving out the permits and giving permission to work. You take ownership in your equipment. It can be tempting to get a big head and become proud and haughty and think, I have more power and am better than people because of the responsibilities that I have, right? It's tempting. It's just human nature is to fall into that, right? Is to fall into that when you have a little bit of authority, a little bit of power over some other person, then it's tempting to wield that power and abuse that power and that privilege and that authority that you have. Even though there's people that have authority over you, right? But you're not looking that direction. You're looking down. Anyway, this contractor comes in the control room and he was confused. These guys, they work in different refineries. They work in different areas of the refinery. They're not as familiar with the equipment as you are. And so he comes in and he's like, hey, can I get a permit for working on this piece of equipment? And this other operator was like, yeah, what you got? And he's just all smug. And he's like, just really talking down to this guy. And the guy's like, well, I think. And he's like, well, you need to know what you're doing. You need to figure this out. And he's just really just kind of raking him over the coals, man. He's reading the riot act. And I'm watching this and I'm just like, really? And the guy's all kind of, and he gets timid, right? Because he doesn't know, and here's somebody that's coming at him all brash, and he ends up, there's exchange happens, and he gets the permit, right? And he leaves, and that guy turns around, and he's like, oh, stupid contractors. And there's several people in this room that I was in that used to be contractors before they were operators. They were a contractor. Right? They've been on that side. And I turned to him. I said, dude, you realize that guy's just trying to feed his family, it's his job, right? He's just trying to make some money, just like you and me. He's like, yeah, but he needs to know what he's doing. He needs to go. I said, well, he didn't know what he's doing. And, part of our job's to help him a little bit. He's not stupid. He's just ignorant of the current circumstances. And he's just all these guys out. Nobody's coming out there to try to cause problems for the most part. They're just out there trying to make a living, man. They're trying to feed their family. And, he eventually matured, right? He matured past that. And personally, I didn't ever see him do it again. But it's very easy for you in your Christian life. You say, I've been a Christian for 20 years. And to sit here and go, that person don't even know. They can't even recite John 3:16. What kind of Christian is that? They're nobody. Who gives them the right to get up on stage and give their testimony from the pulpit? Right? That may happen. You say, who in the world gives them the right? I've known that person. I know that 10 years ago that they were living a sinful life. What makes them so good to come up here and think they're a Christian now? I know who they are. Well, guess what? So were some of you. Right? That's a quote from Paul there. So were some of you. I think it's in 1 Corinthians. So were some of you. He lists all those sins, right? And he says, so were some of you. It's too easy to forget how far we've come and how far we've yet to go and start comparing ourselves to the people around us and think we're better than we are. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, brother. All have sinned. You, me, everybody has sinned. There's only one that has not sinned, and that is who we strive to be like, Jesus Christ, right? Our goal is not to compare ourselves with other people. Our goal is not to put the spotlight on ourselves. That's not the goal. The goal is to point people to Jesus. The goal is to make heaven crowded.